All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So thanks again for joining me today. My name's Kevin Hancock, Director of Solutions here at Exostar. And thanks for coming to today's webinar, Lessons Learned on Certification Assessments, Insights from a C3PAO. So I'm joined by Kyle Lai of KLC Consulting, one of Exostar's partners. KLC Consulting is a C3PAO organization, so Kyle will be doing a large portion of today's presentation. So he's got an intro slide, so I'm gonna wait to introduce him formally, if you will, till we get to his section. But just want to let you know all that's coming up. So before I dive into the formal content, just a few housekeeping details. So today's session is scheduled to last 45 minutes to an hour. That does include question and answer. Now, you're going to be muted during today's presentation. However, a number of folks submitted questions prior to today's webinar, and those are the ones we'll be answering at the end of today's session. Now, one of those questions is almost always, can I get a copy of the slide deck? And the answer is yes. As a follow-up to today's session, you will be receiving the slide deck and a link to a recording of the presentation if you'd like to refer back to any particular section. If for some reason we do have an outage today, just wait for a minute and try to reconnect. You can also use that link you receive via email to try to come back in at any time as well. If at any time you'd like to speak with one of our CMMC experts, or if you have any additional questions, you can reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com via email, or you can come to our website, www.exostar.com. There's a chat feature there on every page, and we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have via that medium as well. So this is the agenda we'll be covering today. Now, where we are in kind of the current CMMC rulemaking process, hopefully as many of you will know, that 32 CFR, and CFR stands for the Code of Federal Regulations, went into effect on 12/16/2024. Now, what that meant is that's when the CMMC program was officially launched. It meant that you can now start to schedule assessments with a C3PA organization. But what isn't yet in place is 48 CFR. And what that is when the actual clauses requiring CMMC will start to show up in DFAR's contract. So that's the one thing we're still kind of waiting for. Now, just a couple notes about the rule. Hopefully, as all of you know, the main difference with CMMC to the existing programs of requiring you to safeguard controlled unclassified information is this introduction of moving away from a self-attestation model to requiring certain groups, and in this case, it's CMMC Level 2 and Level 3, to have a third-party assessment done once every 3 years of their compliance with controls. It also puts in place some definitions around external service providers and cloud service providers. The cloud service providers must be FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP moderate equivalent, and that external service providers who many of you may utilize to implement a portion of your controls or to augment some of your IT staff or do some other functions on your behalf, they're not required to obtain CMMC certification, but their services are assessed as part of your overall CMMC assessment. Now, as we all know, right, in January, new administration took over, and as is typically the case, a regulatory freeze was put into place. Now, that's probably affected 48 CFR in the actual implementation of that. That regulatory freeze has since expired, and 48 CFR is still winding their way through, the official channels. But we do fully expect the CMMC program to be put into place. This was actually introduced under the first Trump administration. The same people who advocated for CMMC during that time are also in this current administration. So we really do expect this to be put into place, and all if you will, indicators say that that will happen. Just a review of the different levels of CMMC, right? We've got level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 are for those organizations that really only deal with federal contract information, right? FCI. If and this is like 63% of those organizations. If you're one of those organizations, then you need to be level 1. And level 1, there are 15 requirements. It's an annual self-assessment and then an annual affirmation that you do those things. Level 2 is where you start to see the introduction of this third-party assessment. And it's an assessment of your implementation of the NIST 800-171 controls. And it specifically calls out revision 2 of that regulation. Now, there is a small portion of organizations which will be able to do a self-assessment at level 2. That will be at the discretion, if you will, of the contracting officer. When contracts are let, they'll determine whether or not it's a CMMC level 2 self-assessment or a third-party assessment. Level 3 introduces some additional controls on top of the NIST 800-171 controls. It's a once every 3-year assessment as well, but that assessment is done by DIBCAC. And at all levels, a senior company official must reaffirm that you do the things that you do on a yearly basis. Now, when CMMC starts to appear in contracts, there is also expected to be an implementation phase in place. This graph I'm showing here is taken straight from the DoD website. They're about CMMC pages. Right. That initial phase 1, the initial implementation of the program, is expected to last a year. And in that year, it's expected that level 1 and level 2 will be self-assessments. After that initial year, that's when you'll start to see the level 2 certification be required. Then after 2 years, we'll start to see the level 3 certification required. And then in phase 4, after 3 years, that will be full implementation of the program. Now, the key thing to keep in mind is that bottom bar there. If the DoD determines that there are some procurement contracts, some particularly specific programs, et cetera, that require it, they do reserve the right to put these CMMC requirements really in place anywhere along this timeline. But at the end of the day, it's going to come down to the contract and the contracting vehicle and what those DFARS clauses are going to require you to sign up for when you sign them. Now, there are still requirements that we all have today if we have a contract with the Department of Defense or if we're a subcontractor to somebody that has that, because the DFARS clauses in these contracts flow down to all the subcontractors as well. So if you've got that 252-204 7012 clause in one of your contracts, or it's been flowed down to you, if you receive CUI as part of the contract vehicle, you've agreed, or if you will, you've contractually obligated to meet NIST 800-171 requirements if you receive CUI and protect it in accordance with that requirement. If you've got the 7019 clause in your contract, right, you've got to do one more step. You've got to, well, it's actually 2 steps, I guess. You've got to actually do a self-assessment of your organization, score yourself based on NIST 800-171A, and then enter that score that you've received into the supplier performance risk system. That's that SPRS system. as you hopefully improve your score over time, you should enter that new number in the SPRS system, because that is something that contracting officers use when determining who's going to win a bid. Now, the SPRS system has a number of different things that go into your overall score. It's not just how you are around cybersecurity, but that is one of the factors they take into effect when awarding bids on contracts. So, as I said, there are requirements you have to do today around NIST 800-171 if you have CUI. So, this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. You should already be doing these things if you've got those contracts in place today. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Kyle, and I'm going to let Kyle share out and move the slides at his leisure. So Kyle, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Really glad to be here. So today we're going to talk about the certification assessments we recently conducted. We have conducted 5 so far, and I'll share some lessons learned and some mistakes that are taken from the assessments, and also some best practices that you may be able to use as you are preparing for the certification assessment. And again, my name is Kyle Lai, President and CISO of KLC Consulting. We are a authorized C3PAO. I am a lead CMMC certified assessor. In the past, I have worked at DISA as an operations manager, as a contractor over there. But that's how I got into the DoD side, and really glad to be here sharing the lessons learned. Okay, and as you know, we're in the DoD space. There are a lot of acronyms. So as Kevin mentioned, the slide will be made available to you, so you will be able to take a look at these acronyms. Okay, just very briefly, let's go through the assessment schedule. This is a very common question. What does a schedule look like when you're starting a assessment? Conducting an assessment by a C3PAO. I cannot speak for all the different C3PAOs out there, but I can speak for ourselves. So as an authorized C3PAO, we will start our assessment after the contract is put in place. We will start our pre-assessment 7 weeks before the actual assessment date, right? But during the initial planning call, we're going to determine which week you are going to conduct the assessment, then we are going to fill in these dates. So 7 weeks before the actual assessment, that's when we will start asking for we are in the pre-assessment phase. We'll start asking for you as an OSC to provide us the system security plan, the SSP, your scoping diagram, your network diagram inventory. So we want to see if you are ready. So we're going to take a look at the documents that you provide to us. We're not going to get into detail in terms of doing the actual assessment of the controls, but we want to see if your SSP is 20 pages or is that 20 more than 100 pages. If you are 20 pages, then we think you are not ready. If we don't think you're ready, we're not going to start the assessment. Okay. If we know that you are ready, then we're going to start the assessment phase. That's when we will work with you to finalize the assessment plan. We're going to conduct the kickoff, the scoping call, the kickoff meeting to just have you walk us through your scope, your diagram, your SSP, walk through the preambles, so we get an understanding of your environment. And in the meantime, it will still ask you to provide us with all the artifacts 2 weeks prior to the assessment start date. That's the cutoff. We want you to provide all your artifacts, the support documents, policies, procedures, screenshots, configuration items to us 2 weeks before. So allow us to do enough proper preparation before the actual assessment. The actual assessment usually take place either on site, depends on if you have the physical environment in place. If you say everything is all in the cloud, we don't have anything that's physically. We don't handle anything physical. No paper. There's no. Everything is all VDI, virtual desktop. Then we will say, okay, we'll conduct everything remotely. But if you do have some, for example, manufacturing, you do have the physical operation, we'll go out to visit at least one day during that week. And during the assessment week, we will start with a day one of the assessment in brief. We'll just go through what we're assessing, the scope. And every day during that week, we're going to have a daily checkpoint to let you know if there are, at the end of the day, if there are anything that's trending met or not met. And some of the simple ones you may have an opportunity to correct. After the assessment week, the last day of the assessment week, you will pretty much know if there are anything that's trending not met. If there are anything trending not met, you will have 10 business days to provide additional artifacts or just to correct these not met, providing that these controls, these requirements, if they are identified as not met, they are not impacting other controls, it will allow you to correct those not met items. Okay, and 2 weeks after the assessment completion, that's when we will provide the out brief. We'll give you the out brief, and also we have to start documenting the document that we have to submit to DoD. And within 30 days, we're going to submit these results, assessment results, to the DoD EMAS system, and then we will generate, if you meet all the requirements to get the conditional or final status. We're going to go through what that means in later slides. But if you meet the conditional or final status, then we, as a C3PAO, will issue the certificate, and you will receive it within 30 days of the assessment completion. So that's just an overview of our process. Okay, and these are the 7 different status, right? And usually these status are defined because in the contract you will see what are the minimum requirements for the status you must achieve, right? And we're going to focus on the number 4 and number 5 because these are the conditional level 2 C3PAO status or final level 2 status. If you're in the conditional level 2 final status, that means you have some plan of action and milestone, you have some deficiencies that are allowed under CMMC, and then you will have 180 days to perform the POEM closeout assessment before 180 days. So if you successfully close out these deficiencies, and these deficiencies you can actually change from not met to met, then we, as a C3PAO, will give you a new certificate saying that now you have a certificate, now you achieve the final level 2 C3PAO status. Okay. And these status all will specify in the DoD contract. So that's how you know what level is required. Okay. And a lot of questions about, hey, what are the assessors looking for, right? What do you assessors look for? So we provide the playbook. This playbook is originally developed by DoD, their audit organization, DIPCAC. So we modified a little bit, make it our own. So you will be able to download from our website. And in this playbook, it's very easy to read. It is all in plain English, so it will be a lot more clear to the OSCs, help you to do the preparation, because you will know what, as a C3PAO, as the assessor, what we're looking for. Okay, so feel free to take a look. Okay, and let's go through some best practices. These are things that we learned from the from our assessments. Okay, so during the pre-assessment phase, you just need to make sure that you have, if you are OSC, right, you just need to make sure that you have at least the SSP network diagram, CMMC, the scoping diagram, and the asset inventory provide to us, so we can see if you are ready. Like I said before, if you are not ready, if we see these documents are not in a good shape or they are just inadequate, they are not sufficient, we are not going to move to the assessment phase. Okay. Okay, and let's take a look at the scoping. Scoping is very important, right? So when we are looking at your scope diagram, when we're looking at your asset inventory, we need to understand that you listed out in detail of all the hardware and the software, and with the asset category labeled for each asset, right? So that means the asset that you have, they are falling into 5 different categories, right? CUI assets, security protection assets, contractor risk managed assets, specialized assets. And some of them, they are listed but have to be out of scope. We want to know that too, right? Out of scope assets. So it has to be clear to us, so we will be able to understand what's in scope and what need to be assessed. And also, this is also very important. If you have multiple cage codes that want to be assessed within one certificate, you must have all the cage codes defined before the assessment starts, right? And once the assessment starts, we already start assessing, and these are the scope. It's all locked in. It will be hard to change the cage codes after the assessment starts. So just make sure that you have the cage codes defined before you start the assessment. And and also the reason is that we have to submit the pre-assessment form, the information to DoD EMS. So once we submit it, we don't want to change it. Okay, and also the cage code. Let's dig in a little bit about the cage codes. All the cage codes that are going to be under the one certificate, you need to make sure that this on OSC side, you need to make sure the cage codes have the same highest level owner, HLO, right? And that is because HPRS, SPRS system, it does not recognize the cage codes that are not under the same highest level owner hierarchy. Okay. And also just need to make sure that you identify the cloud service providers and the managed service providers, right? They are within your scope. You need to identify them. For cloud service providers, CSP that stores, processes, or transmits CUI, they are considered CUI asset. For cloud service providers that handle CUI asset, then you, OSC, you will need to obtain the FedRAMP body of evidence and customer responsibility matrix. And the reason is that you are most likely will inherit some of these controls, and we will need to verify that controls that you are inheriting actually meet the security requirements. Okay. Okay, and also the documentation. This actually pretty often, it's a little bit minor, but this happened quite frequently, is that documentation, they are authorized, but there are dates on the documentation, they don't match. The authorization date and the date on the history, for example, version history, they don't match, right? So it's minor, but this is something that when you are preparing your document, just make sure that dates all match up. Okay, and the OSCs, if you use GRC tools, there are several GRC tools out there that you will be able to use to keep track of to document your SSP controls, security requirements, your policies, procedures, artifacts. We still want to have these artifacts saved in the files, right? And the reason is that we need to have the artifacts in files, individual files. So we will be able to confirm what version of the file, what information, what files we actually observed during the assessment. And also, there is a requirement under the CMMC program rule 32 CFR Part 170 is that OSCs, you must hash the artifacts. Hash, it means like take a signature of your artifacts that you provide to the OSCs. You need to take a hash to preserve the integrity and the non-repudiation of the file. And then you have to save the file and the hash for 6 years. So if there are any questions, there is not going to be any doubt in terms of what files, what information we actually reviewed at the time of the assessment. So it's important to, when you're using the GRC, also output the files and provide that as artifacts to the OSC, to the assessors. Okay. And also, this is more for assessors. As an assessor, we like to make sure that it's easy to find the artifacts, the support documents that are associated with each security requirement, right? So if you provide a support artifacts to us during the assessment, make sure that you label each document that you provided with the CMMC requirement number. Make it easy for the assessor, because if you make it easy, make the assessment a little bit easier for the assessor, make the files easier to find for the assessors, the assessment will go a lot more smoother and maybe a little bit faster. Okay, and also the assessment, who should participate? Team members that manage the CMMC security requirements should participate, and that does not, that means that if you are preparing for CMMC, it's not just IT, right? There could be your HR for the personnel security. There might be your facility people for physical security. So you need to coordinate. If you use a MSP, managed service provider, and you want to make sure that MSP personnel will be available during the assessment, because that's sometimes we do see that we need some information, but the MSP staff, they are not available during the assessment week. So make it a little bit difficult, and there might be some delay on the assessment results. Also want to cover a little bit about the mock assessment. Mock assessment is something that that's offered. It's pretty common and also allowed under the CMMC assessment process. That's by CyberAB. Is that why do we need to do? Why does the OSC choose to do a mock assessment? Because it is a practice, kind of like a practice assessment, practice test, right? And it's conducted by a C3PAO, by the certified assessors, the lead assessors. So yeah, everything is all pretty much the same, except we don't submit the results to the EMAS system at the end. But the mock assessment is a practice test, right? So it will allow the assessors, if there are initial gaps, deficiencies, it will be identified during the mock assessment. So what are the benefits, right? Benefits is that OSC, you become familiar with what the official process look like, because we do follow the official process, right? And also you will be able to have the opportunity, if there are any deficiencies, you will be able to correct them before the final assessment. The only thing that we cannot do as a C3PAO, what we cannot do is that we are not allowed to provide consulting or remediation recommendations during the mock assessment or the end of mock assessment, we cannot provide any consulting, and that is because we as a C3PAO, if we want to conduct the official certification assessment, we'll come back and as an impartial assessor to conduct the certification assessment. So just want to cover that. So, and companies that have gone through the mock assessment before the official certification assessment, they actually have a better results. Okay, I want to cover some common mistakes that we have seen during our assessments, right? So inadequate preparation. This especially happened during the on-site physical security assessment. I think there usually is like, oh, we don't know exactly what you're going to see. So they are not really well prepared. Some of them are not well prepared. But again, I mentioned about the playbook for the assessors. That playbook that we made it available to the OSCs will have a list of 18 controls that we are going to conduct, 18 assessment objectives that we are going to conduct during the physical walkthrough. So it will list it very clearly what we're looking for. The other thing is, the second one is the failure to follow documented frequency. So if your policies or procedures or SSPs say, we're going to do this monthly, make sure you do it monthly, because if you say you're doing it monthly, but you're coming up with something a little bit different, you can do it more frequently. But if you say monthly, but we only do this quarterly, then there will be a gap. Then will make that control not effective, right? So just want to make sure that you follow the frequency that you defined. Missing or expired FIPS validation, that is still, it's pretty famous, right? Certification, you need to use a validated encryption mechanism that's FIPS 140-2 or 140-3 validated. Some of these tools, if they just don't have any FIPS validation, then you cannot use them, or it will be identified as a deficiency, right? If you have a FIPS, if you have a firewall, if you have a firewall that actually has a FIPS 140-2 validation, but it expired. Right, it expired because they have a version upgrade. In that case, the final version, the very latest version of the CMMC assessment guide already provide, and also 32 CFR, the CMMC program rules, stated that if you have a firewall, let's just say equipment that already have the FIPS 140-2 validation, but now the vendor, they are working towards getting a new validation for the next version, you can put this deficiency as an operational plan of action, which is different from the plan of action and milestone, right? So it's no longer a deficiency. This is something that you are working to resolve, but this is the operational plan of action. This is the CMMC specific term. But you want to look into that. So if you have anything that is, say, they are expired, right? FIPS 140-2 validation is expired, you can still use the operational plan of action and make it. If you have the operational plan of action in place, then this control can still be determined as met. Okay. Right. But you just need to make sure that you are using a equipment. If it requires the encryption, yeah, make sure that has FIPS validation at least once. Okay. time synchronization, there's an NTP. You just need to make sure the systems, servers, laptops, firewalls, they're all synchronized to the NTP, the time source, right? But once in a while, we'll actually see that, okay, time sources, different systems are using different time sources. And at the end, you have to prove that you are using the same time source, and the logs actually will document the same time, right? When they're looking at the audit trail, when there's any incident, you can actually see what your logs, what's the log that audit trail have to show the logs and the entries with the actual time, and you will be able to synchronize the time so that the time source is going to be important. You need to make sure they are synchronized. SFTP, secure FTP, is kind of popular out there as a tool for collaborating with your customers, with the OSC customers for the larger files, right? However, a few times we already saw that there are the multi-factor authentications are not enforced. So you need to make sure they do have the capabilities for some of the SFTPs. You just need to make sure that those are enabled. Okay. Specialized assets, contractor risk managed assets, or specialized assets. If you are a manufacturer, you will see this quite often. You just need to make sure they are documented, how you protect these assets, contractor risk managed assets and specialized assets like OT, IoT, how you protect them, document them in the SSP. We're not going to test it. Assessors are not going to test it if you go for level 2, but it still have to be documented. Okay. Inheritance, if you're a cloud service provider or managed service provider, if you use them, if you are inheriting some of these controls, then you have to really document them. Not at the control level, is this control inherited or not? You have to document it. So make it easy for the assessor to understand if the specific requirements are inherited, and if they are fully inherited, partially inherited, or not inherited, right? Make it clear. And if there is an inheritance, then make sure you have the evidence to be able to provide to the assessor. Like we talked about the FedRAMP body of evidence and the customer responsibility matrix. Okay, and this is what we just talked about. The MSP staff, just make sure they are available, because sometimes we are not able to talk to the people. We can reschedule. I mean, we are flexible, be able to reschedule for the MSP, but just make sure that the MSP staff, they are available to answer questions during the assessment week. Okay, and also this one is actually we already seen this a few times. Companies, IT, network diagrams, beautiful, right? But now when we ask, do you do custom develop some software that could be handling CUI? And a couple of them say, yes, we have, but where is that on the network diagram? It's not there. So we really have to make sure that if you're a software development organization, if you are developing some software that are used to handle CUI, then you must include the software environment in the network diagram. And I understand that software environment, sometimes they are not handled by IT. And that's why IT group has to work with the software development group or software security group to get that information into the network diagram, because otherwise it's not complete. Okay. And when we're talking about software environment, we could be talking about the web application firewall, load balancer, your key vault, or some of these, or like a web application, the web server, And if you are using Kubernetes, include that too. So we want to make sure that the software development environment may not be the software production or the support software support architecture is also included in the network diagram. Okay, and several OSCs, they're asking, what is the cost for the assessment? So the cost really depends on the size, complexity, how many sites, right? How many sites do we have to go out to visit? So it all depends. So what we do is we have made this instant quote available. So you can just fill in the information about the size, the number of sites, and the organization, the number of people. That information we will give you a quote. You'll be able to see what's the cost. And that's the end. We'll leave some time for Q&A.
Great, thanks, Kyle. And just a reminder, everybody, you're going to get the slide deck, so you'll get Kyle's sheets and web addresses, etc. So feel free to use the barcodes and look at the stuff and get that idea of what it's going to cost your organization. Let me share out here. All right. All right, so as we wrap it up today, we're going to push out a poll to everybody. Would appreciate your feedback. What we use this poll is for a couple different things. A, just find out how we did today, but then we also do ask if there are additional topics, particular areas, et cetera, you'd like to focus on, which allow us then to tune these webinars for your needs. This is a monthly series that we do just to educate the overall DIB on CMMC topics. So that's what we use this poll for. So we appreciate your feedback on that. So we're going to dive into some Q&A now. But before I dive into the first questions, just let everyone know. So Exostar has a number of solutions around CMMC. We have solutions that help you manage that overall CMMC program and get ready for that assessment. Our Policy Pro application has policy templates that allows you to customize those for your organization. It then has an AI algorithm that will grade those, give you feedback on those. If you've got policies and procedures in place that you've used for other certification programs, for example, if you're using ISO 27001 or something like that, and you've already got some controls in place for certain things, you can use that AI editor to read those through, determine what you might need to tune those for CMMC. Certification Assistant is a GRC tool that's particularly tuned to CMMC. It allows you to manage an overall CMMC program. So it goes through, allows you to do a self-assessment on each of the 110 controls. If you don't have a control in place, allows you to create a POAM, develop a plan to address that particular control, allows you to set tasks against those recurring programs, etc. Provides you that SPURS score on a running basis as part of the dashboard to see how you're doing. If you're looking for a solution to store, process, and transmit CUI, Exostar's Managed Microsoft 365 is a solution up in Microsoft's Azure GCC High, built on top of the Teams environment, which provides that enclave to store, process, and transmit that CUI. And then we have a number of third-party and partners like KLC who can do everything you need to around those different services that are around CMMC as well. So with that, let's dive into the questions. So Kyle, I'm going to ask you the first one here. So, what should a company look for when they're looking for a C3PAO?
Yeah. So first of all, not all C3PAOs are created equal because it all depends on the experience of the lead assessor and also the industries they focus on. So, for example, we talked about software industry, right? So if you're in the software if you are a software developer, you're creating software for DoD, you might want to look for a C3PAO with a lead assessor that have the experience assessing, understanding the software development and understanding how to assess software. If you are a manufacturer, you want to find a C3PO that are familiar with your industry. You don't want to have if you are a manufacturer, you don't want to have an assessor go in and they say, so what is the CNC machine, right? Because that'll be pretty bad because they don't understand your industry at all. It will be a problem. I think that's the good thing. And
Yep.
You want to also just compare a few C3PAOs and just compare and make sure you find one that suits your business.
Absolutely. Okay, so for number 2, and since you've got the the tool on the website as well, you're currently scheduling these, running them out. So what's the current lead time for scheduling the readiness assessment for C3PAOs?
So I think right now what we're saying is that there are about 64 C3PAOs. So
Okay.
their availability for KLC, we're about 60% built full. In terms of this year's capacity, I think we're going to hire more lead assessors at the end, the second half. But right now, I think we still have the availability. However, that as you mentioned, Kevin, that there are some contracts that we saw, for example, Army maps, right? There is already a requirement for either you have the CMMC Level 2 certification or you show the proof that you have the scheduled, you have scheduled a assessment, the CMMC Level 2 assessment with a C3PAO. So when the 48 CFR rule is finalized and when the Army maps or the other schedule, right, other RFPs drop with the requirements, I think we'll see a flood of the OSCs require scheduling for the assessment. So you probably want to at least put yourself reserve a time with the C3PO because we definitely expect there is going to be a floodgate open when this 48 CFR and our different RFPs are coming.
Absolutely. And just everyone, reminder to Kyle's presentation on one of his first slides where it gave you kind of the timeline for the CMMC assessment. There is a lead time for that. There's an exchange of information. There are various scheduling calls, et cetera. So it's not one of those things where you can arrange for somebody to come out next week to do your assessment. There is lead time also once you've scheduled the assessment to get involved. So just take that into consideration as well.
Yep. For us, is 7 weeks prior to the actual assessment start date.
Yep. Okay, so for number 3, as a subcontractor to a major DoD prime contractor, how do we know if any CTI we receive is CUI?
Yep. So this is a very common question.
Yes.
So if you are a subcontractor, you really have to get the information from your prime contractor. So your prime contractor depends on the information that you receive from the prime. You have to ask you have to have that discussion with your prime contractor. If you feel that they are forcing me to get the CMMC Level 2, but we only receive FCI, have that conversation, maybe just need to have a Level 1. But if you are receiving CUI, you need to get the CMMC Level 2 the certification.
Yeah, and I just kind of reemphasize what Kyle said there. If you're unsure, please ask the contracting officer that you're dealing with, right? And if you have any questions about it, please, bring it up to them, and work that out.
Yes, absolutely.
So number 4, can you please elaborate on the status of FedRAMP requirements vis-a-vis CUI handling?
Yeah, so FedRAMP requirements it's for cloud service providers. Right. There are either stores, transmits, or processes CUI information. So if you have the CUI, you will need to get the cloud service provider must have the FedRAMP moderate or FedRAMP high authorization to operate.
Great, because we actually had a few of those kinds of questions came in, and so just know the difference between what's actually processing and storing CUI and what is one of the security protection assets, because there are cloud services that are doing those things as well. So just understand kind of where that cloud service you're utilizing falls into that overall assessment.
Right. And if you are interested in figuring out, hey, am I actually using a cloud service provider or a managed service provider? There's a clear definition that you can take a look at from the CMMC CMMC program rule, or NIST 800-145. That's where it defines the cloud services.
Yep. Okay, so number 5. How and where can we check for status and approval date for 48 CFR? Now, I will caveat this to say I get most of my information from LinkedIn, but I'll let you answer with Kyle as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of speculation right now because it's not really defined. Right now, we are in the proposed rule. So I think the word on the street or from the Cyber AB is somewhere in the summer. Maybe July, August. That's our best guess right now, but obviously we don't know the exact date.
Yep. All right. So before we answer the last few questions, just want to, again, provide some additional information. So again, you'll get the slide deck. You'll be able to refer to this stuff, get some additional information as you need it. So as we continue on with the questions. So how detailed do my compliance statements need to be?
Yeah, we cannot really tell you how detailed it needs to be, but we will say we want to, as an assessor, when we're going to look at the system security plan, I want to be able to see when you are describing your controls, it's meeting every single assessment objective. Right, it's satisfy every single assessment objective. I have to be able to check every box, check off every assessment objectives that you are met. Then the entire control security requirements are met. So that is the minimum requirement. So as long as you cover them, individual assessment objective, you're good. So it doesn't have to be too long. Just make sure you cover all the assessment objectives.
Right, and it's those assessment objectives, I think, that are the key, right? There are 110 controls, but within each of those controls, there are assessment objectives that are, if you will, the detail things that you need to do to meet that requirement. So I think there's 320 of those if you go through and count all of those across the 110.
Yeah, usually they go from A, B, C, D. Those are the assessment objectives.
Yep. Okay, so I've heard there aren't enough auditors to handle all the companies that require it. How does that affect the company's compliance date?
Again, I think right now, if there are not enough auditors to handle, then you will be putting on the backlog. So just make sure that you reserve a date with C3PAO. If you are close to be ready, yeah, I mean, we are taking some reservation until February 2026 right now. Okay. So yeah, some companies, they're reserving their time because they know there's going to be a flood of OSCs coming.
Right, and keep in mind, like DoD knows this. It's why they have that phased implementation plan in place already. So when it does take into effect, it's going to be implemented over phases.
Yes.
But it will, but it's going to it will depend on the contract itself.
Correct. So. And also, I think it's other agencies also are mentioning about you need to meet NIST 800-171, or if you have a CMMC, you're good as well. That NASA actually have those kind of a statement put out.
Right. NASA, DHS recently did something around CUI and NIST 800-171. So DOE has similar. So these are this is becoming more prevalent across the government space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So back to the question we always get. So how much does the C3PAO charge, and how long does the CMMC certification take on average?
Yeah. So I think we already went through these schedule about 7 weeks, and I provided the quote tool, so you will be able to check it out.
Great, thanks. So if we keep CUI within the protected environment, do we still need to have FIPS validated encryption?
Yep. So this is, if we are talking strictly looking at the CMMC assessment guide, if you have a system that is require encryption, they are within your physical environment. They're within your boundary, basically. Then it's protected. Then you do not need to have the FIPS validated encryption. It need to be encrypted, but it doesn't have to be FIPS validated. So we just need to look at the CMMC assessment guide.
Okay. So number 10, I have a risk management framework ATO. Do I still need to get CMMC?
Yes, because RMF ATO, it is to make sure that your system, when you plug in to the DoD network, it is you have the authorization to operate, right? To put into the DoD network. That's DoD network. What we're talking about CMMC is to certify that you are meeting NIST 800-171, which means that you are handling CUI within the contractor's your own network. So there's a difference.
Right. That's everyone. Please understand what NIST 800-171 is. It's guidelines to store and process controlled unclassified information outside government systems. That, if you will, is the formal title of NIST 800-171.
Yep, non-government.
Non-government systems. So that's why it's about your environment.
Yep, absolutely.
So how do I know what CMMC level I need to be?
Yeah, I think we already covered this a little bit, but this will be specified within the contract. RFP or RFI solicitation, that will be very specific on what CMMC level you need to be, and also the, if they allow the conditional final status, it will specify in terms of what certificate or what level you need to be to bid on the contract, or have, what do you need to have before the actual contract award date.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I think we timed this beautifully, right? We're right at the top of the hour. Kyle, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone, thanks for your attendance. And as I said, this is a monthly occurrence. Please feel free to join us next month for the next topic. We have a number of these throughout the month as well about Exostar products, as well as other CMMC topics as well. So thanks again for joining us. Kyle, again, thank you so much for being here.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Take care, all.